Alright, we're talking about quadrilaterals today. So what are the characteristics or features of the figure below? Now you're going to want to say what this figure here is, and maybe you know what it is, but they're asking for the characteristics or features. So in other words, does it have right angles? Does it have this? Does it have that? So what we would say for this figure here, the main thing is that this line right here and this line segment down here, I should say line segment for the part top, these are parallel. So the only characteristic or feature that we're concerned with is that there's one pair of parallel sides. And then of course, how do you classify this figure? Well, when you classify a figure, and you can see I've used red now to help us remember this, we're not looking for parallel sides, we're looking for the name of it. So for one thing, there's four sides. So anything with four sides we call a quadrilateral. But there's another more specific term we can give it, and that term is, of course, probably what you've wanted to say all along, a trapezoid. Alright, same thing here. We're going to ask, what are the characteristics or features of the figure below? Now you're going to want to say the obvious thing that comes to your mind, but what are the features of it? Well, these in the corner here, those are all right angles, right? So one thing I would say is that there's four right angles here. Another thing that I would say is, looking at the sides, they're all congruent. They're all the same length, so they have four congruent sides. And then you can see here, this side right here is going to be parallel to this side, and then this side right here, the top side, is going to be parallel, and it's not a perfect line segment, but you get the idea. It's going to be parallel to that bottom one. So those are the four features. So again, run those back. There's four right angles, there's four congruent sides, and then there's two pairs of parallel sides. I think I said four features. There's really three that we're concerned with, and those are them. And then, of course, how would you classify this figure? Well, anything with four right angles, first of all, anything with four sides, again, is a quadrilateral. Anything with the sides being parallel, when there's two pairs of parallel sides, we call that a parallelogram. And if there's four right angles, we're going to call it a rectangle. Four right angles, and the opposite sides have to be parallel and congruent, which they are in this case. So that's a rectangle. The fourth thing we can call it, since all the sides are equal and the opposite sides are parallel, we can call it a rhombus. And finally, the way that maybe everybody relates to this figure, it's a square, because it has four congruent sides and four right angles and two pairs of parallel sides. That makes it a square. This next shape, here we go. What's behind door number 3? What are the characteristics or features of the figure below? So again, we have, looks like congruent sides. So that's important to note. And opposite sides are parallel. So four congruent sides and opposite sides are parallel. Opposite angles, by the way, are also congruent in this shape. So how would you classify this figure? Well, it has four sides. So the first and easiest way to classify anything with four sides is to call it a quadrilateral. The next thing we can call it, since the opposite sides are parallel, we can call it a parallelogram. And then the third thing, since it has four congruent sides and the opposite sides are parallel, we can call it a rhombus. Alright, behind door number 4, this is our last one, don't worry. You can close off this boring video in a second. What are the characteristics or features of this figure below? Well, it's got four right angles, it's got two pairs of parallel sides, and two pairs of congruent sides. So those are the main things. Opposite sides are congruent, opposite sides are parallel, and then of course the four right angles. And since it doesn't have four congruent sides, we can't call it a square. How would you classify this figure though? Well, four sides, again, we call it a quadrilateral. That's number 1. Number 2, opposite sides are parallel, so we call it a parallelogram. And then number 3, the third and final way, is a rectangle because it has four right angles. Can't call it a rhombus since and they really didn't do a good job of showing this here, but these sides are supposed to be of different length. So these sides would not be congruent, so you can't call it a rhombus, you can't call it a square.